The following episode is written and produced by the True Crime family and distributed by Leeward Podcast Productions. It may include descriptions of violent acts and objectionable language that could offend some listeners. Please consider yourself warned. Now, on with the show. On a cool and crisp January day, back in 2005, a man walked across a Taco Bell parking lot intent on a well-earned lunch break. But he didn't make it. At least, not yet. A car in the lot grabbed his attention. No, not because this automobile was especially cool. The four-door red Geo Prism was nothing eye-catching even when it was new, which this one was not. It was the motions of the parked vehicle that caught his attention. The up and down bouncing, the back and forth jerking, continued while the windows, reacting to the collision of warm and cold air, created a thickening frost shield from the outside world. The man took a moment and considered his options. Should he intervene? After all, even if the car was just responding to the amore within, this was noon in a fast food parking lot, not twilight on some hilltop lover's lane. Still, was it his business to get involved? Everyone else around him seemed to ignore the scene. Why shouldn't he? Regrettably, what those nearby couldn't tell from the bouncing, and what they couldn't see through the windows, was that the individuals within this vehicle had already crossed the thin line between love and hate. In that spot, sandwiched between a busy drive-through lane and a major city avenue, a desperate 16-year-old girl struggled one against two. No, not in the throes of passion, but a fight for her very survival. As the man shrugged the scene off to teenage shenanigans and continued on his path to lunch and what remained of his day, the last gasps of this young girl's future went up in smoke, and her bodily remains would soon follow. What they also didn't know at the time was that the other girl present, the driver of the vehicle, had constantly and consistently threatened various forms of murder on her family, lovers, friends, classmates, and strangers for years. Her words of malice and violence, both verbal and written, had yet gone unheeded. Unfortunately for Adrianne, this time Sarah Kolb had kept her word. This is the True Crime Family Killer Profile of Sarah Kolb, Part 1. Leeward Podcast Productions proudly presents Tuck In with McTavish. However, we need to level with you folks. We signed the renowned reclusive ghostwriter J.B. McTavish to present his favorite spine-tingling tales and scary short stories for your bedtime pleasure. Unfortunately, right before the show was about to start, the man has gone missing, and it seems something evil is afoot. Rest assured, we will keep you updated, and we will not rest until our man is safely back in the studio. In the meantime, the show must go on. So join our temporary host, Nathaniel, weekly, as he presents a short story from one of our favorite authors, both new and classic, likely to give you cause to sleep with one eye open. If you dare, slip under the sheets and find Tuck In with McTavish on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts today. And don't forget to check out our other wonderful podcasts on the Leeward Podcast Productions Network at leewardpodcasting.com. And now, on with the show. Welcome, and thanks for listening to the True Crime Family Killer Profiles. I'm your host, Nathaniel, and with me, as always, is my partner in life and in true crime, Crystal.
Hi, y'all.
Let's start out with a little bit about our latest podcast. We are a true crime podcast show that focuses on the profile of a killer, including deep dives into their background, the lead up to their crimes, the crime itself, the aftermath, and where their case stands now. We are looking to run about an hour, more or less, and release new episodes fortnightly. If you like what you hear, please tell a friend. If you don't, please tell us. You can find us, along with our other great shows, at leewardpodcasting.com. All right, that's enough of the TCF business. Are you ready to get into our case?
Absolutely.
Great. Let's talk about the brutal and senseless crimes of Sarah Kolb. This case has a very personal connection for me because I grew up in the area where this series of tragic events took place. By in the area, I actually mean within a stone's throw, as they say. For context, if I were to walk out my door of my childhood home and started playing whatever top 40 hit was on the radio, I could reach the Taco Bell on foot before the song even ended. Yes, I mean that close. To be fair, I should tell you the location is no longer a Taco Bell. The restaurant moved very shortly after this incident to a location down the street. Now, the spot stands as a testament for one horrific event mixed with happy childhood memories of enjoying my favorite chili cheese burrito. Taco Bell, if you are listening, bring those doggone things back. They were awesome. Further, it's not just the murder location that was close to my childhood. I attended the same junior high that Adrianne did, albeit a couple of years before her, and I passed the Blackhawk Outreach Center nearly every day. I knew, and still know, some of her people, and for the rest, I could say friends of friends. Welcome to town life in Middle America. In 2005, when these events took place, I was in graduate school in Memphis, Tennessee. But like any good Midwestern boy, I followed the events of my hometown. This in particular I followed closely, tuned in to each twist and turn with the same shock and horror as my kin still present. I hurt deeply for her family and friends, and I still do. I kept repeating the same things they did. These things just don't happen where I am from. They just don't. But they did. The scene of this tragic event in 2005 was Moline, Illinois, which is one of the towns that makes up the greater Quad City area. The Quad Cities span the Illinois and Iowa border, divided by the mighty Mississippi River, with the towns of Davenport and Bettendorf in the southeastern Iowa, connected by bridges to the towns of Rock Island, Moline, and East Moline in northwestern Illinois. Now, before you point out that there are more than 4 cities listed, I can tell you that this fact is not lost on the near 500,000 residents. There have been decades of motions to change to the Quint cities, but like most of Middle America, she is stubborn in her ways and rarely quick to change. This further becomes muddied by the fact of her numerous border towns such as Silvis and Milan on the Illinois side, and Riverdale and Pleasant Valley Township on the Iowa side, whose vague borders are barely discernible as you drive in and out of them. The area has a number of claims to fame, but the 2 biggest are John Deere and the Rock Island Arsenal. John Deere, the world-famous agricultural, construction, and forestry equipment manufacturer, was founded in the area and has held her headquarters going all the way back to 1848. The Rock Island Arsenal is a United States Army installation located on Arsenal Island between Davenport, Iowa, and Rock Island, Illinois. It dates all the way back to 1816, then called Fort Armstrong, but is now the site of the single largest government-owned weapons manufacturing site in America for our armed forces. Farming and guns. You can't get more Middle American than that. Speaking of the military, Sarah Ann Kolb was born April 23, 1988, in Germany to an American military family abroad. While traveling over the world can have its perks, military life can also be a tough mistress in any relationship, and her parents' marriage buckled under the pressure. By 1996, her parents, now living in Idaho, had finalized their divorce, and her mother took Sarah and returned to Illinois. They settled in Milan, mere miles from where her maternal grandparents owned a farm. After their return to the Quad Cities, Sarah continued to live with her mother, but their relationship became increasingly strained due to her growing behavioral problems and issues with authority. Not long after, a man entered the picture, and what was once bad soon turned worse. Out of respect for their right to privacy, I will leave them unnamed. However, what I will say is that Sarah did not get along with her new stepfather, nor he with her. This additional rocky relationship resulted in a marked increase in her acting out and running away, now becoming an ongoing theme in Sarah's home life. During this period of Sarah's childhood and early adolescence, her father remained in Idaho working as a deputy sheriff, and his interactions with his daughter were spotty at best. He had no visits with his daughter from the age of 6 until she turned 12, at which time Sarah made a trip back to Idaho to see him. At 13, he made a short visit to the Quad Cities to see her, and at 14, Sarah returned to Idaho for what would be their last visit. By that final time, the writing was on the wall. Sarah had changed so drastically and showed so little respect to the man as a father or as a police officer that he was forced to end the visit early and send Sarah back to her mother. It appears her issues with authority started young and only grew worse as she grew older. Sarah Kolb was most often described as an angry person, impulsive, mean-spirited, cruel, domineering, paranoid, and even a split personality. When she loved deeply and obsessively, and when she hated, it was the same. And she could switch between the two on a dime. With Sarah, I want to marry you and I want to murder you could happen in the same breath. Sarah was also known frequently to muse out loud about what it would be like to murder someone, and then get away with it. Unfortunately, in a few years she would come to know the first part, but thankfully not the second. In the meantime, threatening others directly with physical harm, slitting their throat, murdering them and cutting them into pieces, or even more colorful threats were becoming a commonplace pastime for Sarah. How far into Sarah's past her fascination with murder and the macabre went, we do not know. However, she claimed that a major turning point was witnessing the events around a relative's suicide. Although we can't verify this as the root cause, what we do know is that she found a group that not only accepted these traits and behaviors, but allowed her to elevate them to a whole new level: the Juggalos. Juggalo is the name used by the ultra-hardcore fan base of the rap group, the Insane Clown Posse. The roots of the ICP developed between 1989 and 1991 when friends Joseph Bruce and Joseph Utzler translated their original Detroit group Inner City Posse to the now Insane Clown Posse, and began to produce and record their horror and supernatural-centered hip-hop. The ICP is still active today and continue to record under their independent label, Psychopathic Records. Many who study this case dig deep into the Juggalo angle and lay much of the blame on this group and its subculture.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that group, but didn't know that they were that extreme.
Well, they had a pretty big influence here in the Quad Cities, and I tend to disagree. I mean, no doubt their lyrics are disturbing to most people, and most of them don't feel the need to emulate their dress or paint their faces like sadistic clowns. But to draw a direct correlation between being a so-called juggalo and the heinous murder of Adrianne Reynolds is to me a vast oversimplification and scapegoating. Even though Sarah Kolb was involved with the local juggalo group and may have been on her way to becoming their de facto leader of sorts, there's plenty of evidence that this girl was broken long before her encounter with the Insane Clown Posse group culture. Sarah briefly attended Rock Island High School, which she left with no degree, achievements, or accolades. Just a number of people carrying terrible memories of their experiences with her during that short time. Among those who felt threatened would include her girlfriends during that time, as Sarah was also openly bisexual. Her obsessive possessiveness and jealousy, while possibly endearing at the beginning of a high school-style romance, was often the cause of its demise and resulted in her post-relationship terrorizing. Her brief stint at a traditional high school ended with Sarah's transfer to an alternative school. In 2003, at the age of 15, Sarah began attending the Blackhawk Outreach Center. The Blackhawk Outreach Center, still in existence today, hosts an alternative GED program to provide those students who, for varied reasons, cannot finish in a traditional high school setting. Their students attend only morning classes specifically designed to prepare them to take the varied sections of the GED exam. For most of the BHOC students, this is their last chance to either earn a diploma or enter the world permanently as a dropout. It was during this time at the Outreach Center that Sarah would meet and ensnare another participant in this tragic tale, Corey Greggory. Corey Charles Greggory was born on November 2nd, 1987. Although Corey would later become Sarah Kolb's part henchman and part patsy, he did not start out that way. In fact, many remember the young Corey as being friendly, shy, and sweet, the type of guy that would give you the shirt off his back if you asked. The boy was an artist and a poet, really a romantic. Then drug and alcohol use entered Corey's life. According to those who knew him later, drugs and alcohol consumed the boy he once was and left behind someone who would try any and every fix he could get his hands on. Whether this awakened something that was always there within him or twisted him into someone he never intended, I don't think we will really ever know. What we do know for certain is that he changed. Corey became unpredictable, sullen, and withdrawn one minute, then inexplicably violent the next. People have differing opinions about the changes in his life and when and why, but the one constant and predictable thing they agree on was Corey's cult-like devotion to Sarah Kolb. Corey met Sarah during his sophomore year at the local mall. They went behind a department store to have a smoke, which turned to sharing a joint, which turned to sharing interests and life experiences, which turned to Corey falling fast and hard for Sarah Kolb. Love at first sight. Head over heels, as they say. Well, for him anyway. For her, not so much. From nearly the first moment they crossed paths, Sarah could talk him into anything, which included dropping out of his current school and becoming her sidekick at the Outreach Center. Corey did this without his family's permission or blessing. He just presented it as a done deal after the fact. Sarah dictated, and he obeyed. Sarah also introduced him to the juggalo lifestyle, and, as with all things Sarah Kolb, he fell right in step. Her growing control over his life did not go unnoticed. People couldn't tell whether it was just his romantic delusions that, maybe if he just hung in there and became whatever she wanted, Sarah would grow to requite his love, or that Corey might simply just be bewitched. Either way, it wasn't long before someone simply saw Corey as a puppy on a leash, following Sarah as she continued to dangle the possibility of the will she or won't she. This unbalanced relationship status quo between Sarah and Corey remained until late 2004 when the new girl, Adrianne Reynolds, showed up at the Blackhawk Outreach Center and threatened Sarah's status in her social circle and dared to weaken Corey's chain in the bargain. So began the whirlwind 3 months that, on January 21st, 2005, would end with Adrianne's murder. Adrianne Lee Reynolds was born in El Dorado, Arkansas, September 12, 1988. Her birth mother, Carolyn, was 16 at the time and nowhere near ready to be a parent, and her biological father was even less so. As fate would have it, Tony Reynolds was living in El Dorado at the time. He had met and fell for Beverly, Carolyn's mother. While Carolyn was pregnant, Tony moved in and later married the soon-to-be maternal grandmother. To make matters even more interesting, shortly after the birth of Adrianne, the maternal grandmother, Beverly, and her marital grandfather, Tony, agreed to adopt her, thereby becoming Adrianne's legal parents and guardians. This arrangement made Carolyn's daughter, at least on paper, now her sister. Unfortunately, after only a few years, the marriage between Tony and Beverly soured. in 1992, 3-year-old Adrian's adoptive parents divorced. Even though Adrianne was his daughter by adoption, Tony continued to love and care for her, which included consistent visitations and continued child support payments.
She truly had an unstable childhood early on, but it sounds like Tony truly cared and loved her and was there to support her.
Absolutely, and you see that in her early years, and you also see that even more in her later. In 1995, the now 6-year-old Adrianne was once again uprooted when Beverly moved Adrianne and Carolyn to Longview, Texas, where Beverly was born and raised. Despite this extra distance, Tony continued to make the extra effort to be a part of Adrianne's life, both by traveling to see her and visiting her when Beverly returned to see her family and friends in El Dorado. During their time in Longview, Carolyn was trying desperately to get her own life on track. She met a man, got married, and had another child. With her new family, she now wanted Adrianne back. So once again, Adrianne was shuffled into a new family environment. However, Adrianne's new life would not stay stable for long. 2 major events occurred in succession that once again changed the trajectory of her life. Her birth mother, Carolyn, divorced her new stepfather, and her adoptive father, Tony, went to prison for selling crystal meth. Soon after that shakeup, Carolyn introduced another stepfather into the picture, and the next 6 years of Adrianne's young life only compounded on the issues of her first 6.
Goodness, I can't even imagine any child having to handle that many disruptions in her childhood while also trying to understand at that young of an age everything that's happening around her.
Well, absolutely. And whether it was the instability of the life that she had experienced nearly from birth, her new home life that included being left unsupervised for extended periods of time, or existing psychological issues that were never addressed, Adrianne's life took a shockingly quick and steep downward spiral that just couldn't seem to hit bottom. By the age of 12, Adrianne had already racked up 3 assault charges and an extended stint in rehab. Nearing the end of 2003, by the age of 14, Adrianne was living a hard life of drugs, alcohol, and promiscuous sex that would put a middle-aged addict to shame.
By 14 years of age, she'd already lived a lifetime. I can only imagine how lost she must have been. She was a young girl crying out for help.
Well, absolutely. And what shouldn't come as a surprise is that by this time the state of Texas has gotten involved in her life. What might come as a surprise, though, is that it's because of accusations Adrianne made of sexual assault by her stepfather and physical assault and threats of murder committed by her mother. I'm going to jump ahead into the future for a moment and mention that these cases were never proven and any charges were dropped. Adrianne herself confessed to the judge that she made up the sexual assault charges. However, it's worth noting that there are still plenty of people who believe those accusations to be true, including the original investigator of the charge. I'm going to leave my personal thoughts for a later section and stick here to the facts. Nobody to date has been convicted stemming from any of these charges. Near the end of 2003, the state stepped in and removed Adrianne from Carolyn. However, Carolyn reached out to Tony and, rather than leaving Adrianne at the mercy of the foster care system, begged him to take her. Tony, who had recently reconnected with them and was making an active effort to rebuild their relationship, seemed like an answer to her current troubled situation.
He definitely seemed like the best possible option to try and help her get her life back on track.
Definitely, and while Adrianne's life back in Texas was falling further and further apart, Tony completed his sentence and was now back home in Illinois, where he had grown up. Once settled in East Moline, he had worked hard to pull his life together, including landing a job and even marrying his high school sweetheart, Joanne. Although he had lost touch with Carolyn and Adrianne during his time in prison and later struggles to rebuild his life, Tony was a stand-up guy who clearly felt obligated to come to Adrianne's aid. He agreed to take her, despite the fact that he was still on parole and Joanne had serious reservations. Joanne's reservations were certainly understandable given that, by all accounts, Adrianne could be more than a handful and had leveled some serious charges against her family back in Texas. Joanne was both a wife and a mother of 2 boys living in the home, and she understood all too well that if anything with Adrianne went sideways, true or false, it could quickly destroy the family life they had worked so hard to build.
Which is very understandable, especially in a new marriage, not understanding fully how an introduction of a new family member may change the current family dynamic.
Well, despite the inherent risks, Tony and Joanne allowed 14-year-old Adrianne a chance to come up to Illinois and live with them. They made every attempt to provide her with the discipline and a stable home life, while also trying to correct her academic life by enrolling her in Glenview Middle School. Even though every day with her was a struggle, Adrianne hated school and the work it entailed. They managed to get her through the school year. However, just surviving the constant grind and battle with Adrianne had worn them out, and when she told them she missed Texas and wanted to move back, they were more than willing to let her go. Adrianne recanted the abuse charges, confessing that she made them up, and returned to Texas and her mother. Now, if the timing of her confession seems suspect to you, don't worry, it does to me too, and we will go back to this a bit later. Now, Adrianne stayed in Texas. It turned out to be an action-packed but only 4 months. Starting nearly from the time of her arrival, Adrianne and her mother were back at each other again. The endless cycle of fighting, drugs, drinking, and running away quickly became the normal behavior from Adrianne once again. After just a few months, Adrianne made it clear she would not continue living with her mother. However, she also argued against leaving Texas and her friends. Her solution? Adrianne had the bright idea of moving in with a boyfriend of hers. Her mother had a differing opinion, and she reached out once again to Tony. In late 2004, after some intense back and forth between Tony and Adrianne, she agreed to return to East Moline and to Tony. Once again, Adrianne, now 15 and fast approaching 16, packed herself up and changed her residence, school, friends, and authority figures.
That's a lot of moves and life experience for just a 15-year-old.
Well, and because of Adrianne's behavioral and academic issues, Tony and Joanne felt like the Blackhawk Outreach Center had the best chance of getting young Adrianne's life back on track. A decision, one that seemed so right at the time, would result in a series of events over the next 3 short months that would call that singular choice into question for many years to come. Up to this point, we focused on the negative life events that led Adrianne to the Blackhawk Outreach Center. However, there was so much more to this young woman, or Lil Bit, as she was fondly nicknamed, than the sum of her experiences. In fact, I would go so far as to argue that it was the positive things about Adrianne that made her a target, not the negative. Whatever her misgivings about the toils of schoolwork, Adrianne was employed at a local Checkers restaurant franchise where she was known as a hardworking and very dependable employee. It was actually her dedication to her job that alerted her family so quickly to her disappearance. She was also a singer, and by all accounts a very talented one, like American Idol or The Voice might not have just been a crazy dream kind of good. Adrianne was seriously talking about joining the Marines, which shows a selfless side to her character. She was also considered by many of her peers as beautiful, charismatic, and fun-loving. It was not only her looks, though, that attracted attention, it was also her spirit. Adrianne was a fighter, someone who stood up for herself and for others, regardless of the situation or the odds. That girl had grit.
Sounds like she was really trying to turn her life around and had the potential for a very bright future.
It definitely appeared she was on track for that. And when Adrianne arrived at the outreach center, like most teenagers, what she wanted most was to be liked and to fit in. Unfortunately, she was also willing to pay too high a price for that benefit. Most of us come to realize this, and we have a chance to correct our course. It's all part of growing up and maturing. But Adrianne would never get that chance. By the time Adrianne arrived back in the Quad Cities and started attending the Blackhawk Outreach Center, Sarah Kolb seems to have consolidated her power not only as Queen Bee of the social misfit tribe at the alternative school, but also as a powerful leader within the local Juggalos group. From day one, Adrianne had no problem attracting attention, as her good looks and cute Texas twang turned many heads at the school. This included Sarah Kolb, who, upon spotting the new student, is known to have commented on her hotness and expressed an interest in getting to know her. Sexual orientation or preferences play a major role in this case. Even today, there seems to be some discrepancy in opinions as to whether Adrianne was bisexual, bi-curious, or sexually interested in women at all. On the one hand, we have a series of handwritten notes from Adrianne to Sarah that express an interest in Sarah that, at the very least, rise to the level of bi-curious. However, we know Adrianne was also a savvy and streetwise girl. One could argue that it took her little time to recognize Sarah as the alpha of the pack. Given that Kolb's sexual preferences were no secret, perhaps Adrianne saw playing coy at expressing sexual interest as merely a means and an opportunity of getting close to the charismatic leader. On the other hand, maybe Adrianne had a sincere sexual interest in females and true romantic feelings for Kolb. Either way, there appears to be no evidence that the two actually physically hooked up. Sarah Kolb, for her part, made no secret of expressing a serious interest in Adrianne as a romantic partner and a potential relationship, but with the added caveat of wanting to take it slow. Sarah had confessed to a number of people that she had recently been burned by an older woman and she was looking not for a repeat performance. Still, over a relatively short period of time, Sarah brought Adrianne further into her social group's inner circle. During this grooming period, Adrianne's popularity soared. However, in the often murky world of teenage cliquedom, it's really not clear whether Adrianne's star rose as the cause-effect of popularity by association or simply because Adrianne was a shining light in her own right. What we do know for certain is that the resulting popularity set off the ever-present paranoia in Sarah Kolb. She expressed her concern to Corey that Adrianne may just be an imposter in their group, not really one of them. Worse yet, she may be a potential power rival. Kolb demanded absolute loyalty from those in her inner circle and decided it was time to put Adrianne to the test.
I have a sinking feeling in my stomach that with what we know about Sarah Kolb, Adrianne was walking into a trap of some kind.
I know, right? You're at that moment where you want to scream out, "Don't go into the house."
Absolutely.
But unfortunately, this is real life. And speaking of a house, a few juggalos rented a house together in Rock Island, which quickly turned into a crash pad and clubhouse for their local hardcore juggalo crew. On this faithful night, Sarah brought Adrianne into her group's inner sanctum, not for the casual hang or meet and greet she sold to Adrianne, but as a twisted loyalty test that bordered on a purity examination. As soon as they arrived, Sarah immediately took to spreading the word around the house that the new, cute Texas teen she brought with her was there to get laid. This planned manipulation had two parts. First, Sarah made it clear to Adrianne that she was cool with her getting some action. Second, Sarah made it clear to the party attendees that she was giving her consent by acting as a facilitator to Adrianne's coupling. The trap was set.
Not good.
And at first it seemed that Sarah Kolb would have found either outcome acceptable. On the one hand, if Adrianne stayed chaste, she would show herself to be both a good girlfriend and a loyal follower. On the other hand, if Adrianne went ahead and jumped into bed with someone she just met, Sarah would have the proof that Adrianne really was a poser and also the ammunition she would need to get her shunned. However, as the party got into full swing, Sarah appears to have changed her mind. As she watched everyone flock to Adrianne and shower her with attention, only one outcome became acceptable in Kolb's paranoid mind. She must destroy the new girl, this new threat. Under the guise of a good wing woman, Sarah stepped up her campaign to fulfill Adrianne's carnal desires. The plan worked. Adrianne started complaining about a headache and was offered the basement as a place to lie down. Shortly after directing Adrianne to a bedroom, Corey, with a K, was sent down to take care of her. As it turned out, Sarah's scheming worked. Later that night, she took Adrianne home, showing no hint that she objected to that night's events or the hell she planned to unleash on Adrianne in the coming days. It was those next few days that marked a drastic turning point in Adrianne's life, and I can only imagine how it came to quite a shock. It was almost as if she went from the life of the party that everyone wanted to get to know to a social pariah in just a matter of hours. Whore, slut, spreads around like Jiffy, stay away unless you like STDs and the like. It didn't take anyone long, including Adrianne, to track the source of these hateful assaults on her character. Sarah had spoken, and the word was the new girl was out. Not being one to take anything lying down, Adrianne attempted to face the matter head on. First, she attempted to reach out to Sarah and fix the situation, even though Adrianne was confused why there was an issue to begin with, given that Sarah made it clear she had her blessing. She went so far as to even apologize for her actions. All of her attempts were rebuffed by Sarah. Second, even though she was now the outcast of the outcasts, Adrianne refused to slink away and hide.
I just wish Adrianne would have just taken the deceit and betrayal by Sarah and all those around her and moved on, putting those efforts into trying to find new friends.
Well, like I said before, Adrianne had grit, and she wouldn't lay down, for this type of behavior. And just 2 days later, Adrianne actually returned to the party house, this time without Sarah. It should come as no surprise that this cute, funny, bright, and charismatic teen girl was not exactly turned away by the boys of the house. However, another girl who was present did not feel the same, and she reached out to let Sarah know Adrianne was at the house. Not to be outdone, Sarah quickly made her own appearance. When she arrived, Kolb quickly called out Adrianne in front of everyone, throwing out every nasty slur she could come up with to embarrass and shame the girl. To make her point even more clear, she pulled a knife and threatened Adrianne. After that, even the thick-headed boys got the picture. Adrianne was now persona non grata. However, even in this heightened environment, Adrianne simply would not be deterred. Her responses to her situation showed she believed that to return from exile, she would have to go through Sarah Kolb. Over the next few late fall and into winter weeks, Adrianne started taking ever increasingly drastic measures to rectify her situation. The more Sarah pushed her away, the harder Adrianne tried. The girl left a flurry of unaccepted notes, unanswered phone calls, and unmoving appeals to others in Sarah's inner circle in her wake. Little by little, Adrianne even changed her outward appearance to match Sarah's gothic style. Nothing she tried seemed to move Sarah even an inch. Although on the outside Adrianne appeared tough and resolute, inside her insecurities were eating away at her. Her behavior started sending off warning bells to Tony and Joe at home. Drastic changes in appearance and attitude, self-harm, hints at suicide. Though the girl was trying to stay strong, the relentless attacks and cold shoulder tactics of Sarah and her minions were clearly taking their toll. They took Adrianne to see a counselor, and she was prescribed meds. Quickly, these intervention measures appeared to bear fruit. Adrianne seemed to be stabilizing, and her home life started to settle down. That's not to say there weren't still issues, but things were moving towards more acceptable teenage angst and rebellion. Like, oh, you say I can't get that pierced? Well, I did it anyway. It wasn't perfect, but it was an impressive work in progress. By the end of 2004 and into January 2005, there was a marked change in Adrianne in both attitude and spirit. With her newly rediscovered confidence, she made a distinct tactical shift. Although she continued to try to reach out to Sarah, Adrianne did so not nearly as often and not nearly as needy. More as a, hey, it'd be great if we could just bury the hatchet and get along, but whatevs position. During this time, Adrianne also shifted her attention to Greggory, and he, in turn, did not appear to have, to be opposed to her new situation or attention. They began to share notes and even hang out. Without Sarah. Adrianne even went so far as to chastise Corey for his adoration and cult-like loyalty to Sarah, regardless of how Sarah treated him in return. What Adrianne continued pointing out to Corey was nothing more than something any caring friend should and would bring to their attention. However, word of Adrianne's rediscovered spirit of independence and making time with her disciples made its way back to Sarah Kolb, and she would have none of it. There would be no mutiny or dethroning in her little kingdom. Thanks for listening, and join us in a fortnight for the stunning conclusion of Killer Profile, Sarah Kolb. For now, this is Nathaniel
And Crystal
saying, until next time, stay safe and take care of each other. You have been listening to the True Crime Family Killer Profiles, a Leeward podcast production. We would love to hear from you. Find us on Facebook at True Crime Family Podcast and on Twitter at True Crime Fam. Also, please visit www.leewardpodcasting.com and check out some of our other shows now available. If you have a case you want the True Crime Family to cover, email us at truecrimefamily@leewardpodcasting.com. For now, stay safe out there, and we will see you next time.